When my stepmother's hand connected with my cheek in that freezing mountain lodge, I assumed the bruise would be the holiday's ugliest souvenir. I was wrong. The true devastation arrived later, when my grandfather quietly slid a one-way ticket toward me and whispered that it was time to send the right person away. By the time the plows cleared the roads, she had lost her temper, her home, and the fortune she thought she had secured for herself. My name is Sabine Mercer, and if I had known what was waiting for me at the top of the mountain, I might have opened the car door and rolled out onto the asphalt of Highway 70 somewhere outside of Denver. Instead, I sat pressed against the cold glass of the rear passenger window, watching the gray slush of the roadside give way to the pristine white of the Rockies. I am 32 years old. I am a senior data specialist at Heliopath Insights. I spend my days analyzing behavioral patterns and predicting outcomes based on hard numbers. Yet, sitting in the back of my father's overcrowded SUV, I felt exactly like the powerless teenager I used to be, trapped in a silence so loud it made my teeth ache. We were 2 hours into what my stepmother, Loretta, had branded the ultimate healing holiday. According to the itinerary she had emailed out 3 weeks ago, this trip was our last chance to be a family before Grandpa Walter was moved into the assisted living facility she had picked out for him. The narrative she was spinning was tragic and noble. She was the caring daughter-in-law, making one final memory for the fading patriarch. But from where I sat, squeezed next to my teenage half-brother Mason, the reality looked very different. Dad was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel as he navigated the icy switchbacks. Loretta was in the passenger seat, her voice filling the car with a manic, nervous energy that she tried to pass off as holiday cheer. "Look at those pines, Charles," she chirped, pointing at a blur of green and white. "Just like a postcard. I knew Redwood Summit was the perfect choice. It feels magical already, doesn't it? It feels like we can just leave all the ugliness of the city behind." By ugliness, she meant me, or rather, she meant the tension that entered the room whenever I did. I shifted my legs, trying to find a comfortable position without kicking the seat in front of me. Next to me, Mason had his noise-canceling headphones on, his thumbs flying over the screen of a handheld console. He was 17 and had mastered the art of checking out of this family years ago. Beside him sat Grandpa Walter. He was staring out the window, his jaw set in a hard line. He had barely spoken since we picked him up from his small bungalow this morning. "Sabine," Loretta said, twisting in her seat to look at me. Her smile was tight, a practiced expression that never quite reached her eyes. "You are being awfully quiet back there. I hope you are not checking work emails. I told you, this is a digital detox. We need to be present." "I am just looking at the snow, Loretta," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "I left my work laptop at home." "Good," she said, smoothing the front of her cashmere sweater. "I know how you get, married to that job. It is a shame, really. Holidays are for families, for children. It must be so lonely for you, being so focused on spreadsheets while everyone else is building a life. You are a little too cold for the warmth of a real home sometimes. Sabine, just like your mother was." The cabin went silent. Dad cleared his throat but said nothing. He never said anything. That was the agreement he seemed to have signed when he married her 15 years ago. Peace at the price of his spine. I looked at Grandpa Walter. He turned his head slowly and met my gaze. His eyes, usually cloudy with age, were sharp. He gave a microscopic shake of his head, a silent command for me not to engage. I swallowed the retort burning in my throat and turned back to the window. I was a data analyst. I dealt in facts, and the fact was, arguing with Loretta was a game rigged for the house to win. We stopped for gas 40 minutes later at a station that looked like it had been carved out of a snowbank. The wind was biting, cutting through my coat the moment I stepped out to stretch my legs. Dad was pumping gas, looking exhausted. Loretta had marched inside to buy snacks, probably organic chips that no one liked, but looked good in a bowl. I was standing near the rear bumper, stomping the snow off my boots, when I felt a tug on my sleeve. It was Grandpa Walter. He had shuffled out of the car while I wasn't looking, leaning heavily on his cane. Grandpa, I said, moving to steady him, it is freezing out here. You should get back inside. He gripped my arm with surprising strength. His leather gloves were worn, the same pair he had worn for 20 years. He looked toward the convenience store where Loretta was visible through the glass, examining a rack of magazines. Take this, he whispered. His voice was rough, like gravel tumbling down a chute. He pressed a folded piece of lined notebook paper into my palm. What is this? I asked. Read it later, he hissed, his eyes darting back to Dad, who was staring mindlessly at the gallons ticking up on the pump. Not now, not where she can see. Before this year ends, me and you need to talk private, real private. Grandpa, are you okay? Is this about the facility? It is about everything, he said. Then, seeing the glass door of the store open, he pushed me gently away. Put it away, now. I shoved the paper into the deep pocket of my coat just as Loretta emerged, waving a bag of pretzels. Who wants trail mix? She called out, her voice shrill against the howling wind. I got back into the car, my heart hammering a strange rhythm against my ribs. I felt the crinkle of the paper in my pocket. I had assumed this trip was about saying goodbye to the version of my grandfather I knew before dementia or frailty took him completely. But the man who had gripped my arm did not look frail. He looked desperate. We arrived at the lodge as the sun was beginning to dip behind the peaks, casting long violet shadows across the snow. It was a massive structure of timber and stone, sitting isolated at the end of a long private drive. It was beautiful. Exactly the kind of place you rent when you want to prove to the world that you are successful and happy. I am telling you, I have a gift, Loretta announced as she climbed out of the car, spreading her arms wide as if she had built the place herself. I spent weeks scouring the listings to find this gem. It takes a certain eye to find luxury like this. Charles, you have to know what you are looking for. I stood by the trunk, hauling out my suitcase. I felt a flash of heat rise up my neck that had nothing to do with the car heater. I remembered the bank notification on my phone from 3 months ago. I remembered the transfer of $2,500 for the deposit because Loretta's credit card had been declined, and she had called me in a panic, begging me to cover it just until Charles gets his bonus. She had promised to pay me back within 2 weeks. I hadn't seen a dime. It is lovely, Loretta, Dad said, unloading the groceries. It is perfect, she corrected him. She walked up the steps, fishing the key code out of her purse. As she dug through her bag, I saw it, a thick, black leather folder. She pulled it out to get to her phone, then immediately shoved it back down, zipping the bag shut with a sharp, aggressive motion. She looked over her shoulder, catching me staring. What? She snapped. Nothing, I said. Just waiting for the door. Inside, the lodge was cavernous. A fire was already laid in the massive stone hearth, waiting for a match. There were vaulted ceilings and a wall of windows overlooking the valley. It screamed money. It screamed leverage. Dinner that night was a masterclass in tension. Loretta had insisted we dress up, even though we were eating takeout pizza because the gourmet meal she planned to cook required ingredients she had forgotten to buy. She made us sit at the long mahogany table, lighting 6 candles to set the mood. Mason, take those headphones off, she commanded. Charles, pour the wine, the expensive bottle. We are celebrating. What are we celebrating? I asked, cutting into a slice of pepperoni. Family, Loretta said, lifting her glass. Her eyes were hard. And the future, and making the right decisions for everyone. She made us pose for a photo, then another, then one more because Walter looked too grumpy in the first 2. She leaned over Dad's shoulder, applying filters, brightening the exposure until we looked like a radioactive version of ourselves. Post that, she murmured to herself. Caption, blessed to be together in our winter wonderland. I watched Grandpa Walter. He hadn't touched his wine. He was watching Loretta with a look of profound suspicion. Every time she moved her purse, which sat on the floor right next to her feet, his eyes flicked toward it. So, Sabine, Loretta said, setting her phone down, I was looking at the guest list for the cousin's wedding in June. I put you down as +1 just in case, but I suppose I should change that to single so we do not waste a plate? It is $60 a head, you know. I am fine going alone, Loretta, I said. I know you are, she sighed, looking at Dad. She is so independent, isn't she, Charles? Does not need anyone, just like you. Walter, stubborn, but even the stubborn ones need help eventually. We all have to face reality when we can no longer manage our own affairs. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. This wasn't a conversation. It was a preamble. I am going to bed, Grandpa said abruptly. He pushed his chair back, the wood screeching against the floor. I am tired. Of course, Dad, Loretta said, her voice instantly turning syrupy. You rest. We have a big day tomorrow. Lots to do. I stayed up for another hour, nursing a glass of wine I didn't want, listening to Loretta outline the hiking schedule for the next day. Finally, I excused myself. My room was on the second floor, a small loft space that looked down over the main living area. The bed was comfortable, buried under layers of down comforters, but I couldn't sleep. The silence of the mountains was absolute, which meant every sound inside the house was amplified. Around 1 a.m, I heard footsteps, soft, sock-footed steps on the hardwood below. I crept out of bed and moved to the railing, crouching in the shadows. The lights were off downstairs, but the glow from the dying embers of the fireplace cast long, dancing shadows across the room. I saw 2 figures standing near the kitchen island. Lower your voice, Loretta hissed. It was a whisper, but in the cavernous room, it carried straight to me. I do not like this. Low, Dad's voice replied. He sounded weary, defeated. He seemed sharp today. Did you see him at dinner? He was watching you. He is paranoid. Charles, that is part of the decline. The doctor said so, Loretta argued. And that is exactly why we need to get this done here. We are snowed in. No distractions. No Sabine whispering in his ear, checking the math, asking questions that are none of her business. But if he refuses? He won't, Loretta said. I heard the distinct sound of a zipper, the leather folder. We have 4 days. I am not leaving this mountain until that signature is on the line. Charles, we cannot afford to let Walter change his mind. Not with the debt we have. This is survival. Are you with me or not? I am with you, Dad said, though it sounded more like a surrender than a pledge. I don't want a scene. There won't be a scene, Loretta promised. Just a signature, and then we can finally breathe. I pulled back from the railing, my heart pounding so hard I felt it in my fingertips. I retreated into my room and closed the door silently, leaning my back against the wood. This wasn't a holiday, it was an ambush. I moved to the window and looked out. The snow had started to fall heavier now, thick white flakes erasing the world outside, sealing us in. The road we had driven up was disappearing. Buried under fresh powder, we were trapped. I thought about the $2,500 deposit I had paid. I thought about the notebook paper in my coat pocket that I hadn't dared to read yet. And I thought about the leather folder downstairs. Loretta thought she had brought us here to simplify things. She thought she had isolated the old man and his nosy granddaughter to secure her payday. I watched the snow pile up against the glass, feeling a cold resolve settle in my chest, sharper and more dangerous than the winter air. She was right about one thing. This trip was going to decide our future. But as I stared at my reflection in the darkened window, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to be the one who paid for it. The next morning, the world was encased in a layer of ice so thick it looked like the lodge had been dipped in glass. I stepped out onto the wraparound porch just after 6, clutching a ceramic mug of black coffee as if it were a lifeline. The air was thin and bit at the exposed skin of my face, but I welcomed the sting. It felt real. It felt honest, which was more than I could say for the people sleeping inside the expensive timber walls behind me. I stood near the railing, looking out at the jagged peaks of the Rockies, and let the cold settle into my bones. Loretta always said I was cold. She used it as an insult, a weapon to devalue my reactions whenever I failed to cry on cue or laugh at her jokes. But standing there, watching the sunrise bleed a pale, bruised purple over the snow. I traced the history of that coldness back to its source. It did not start with me. It started the day she walked into our house, 11 months after my mother died, wearing a pastel yellow dress and a smile that looked surgically attached. I was 14 years old then. My father, Chuck, was a man drowning in grief, unable to wash a dish or pay a bill without breaking down. Loretta appeared like a rescue team of one. She was a friend from church, a woman who brought casseroles and organized the mail. She told everyone who would listen that she was just stepping in to help a broken family find its way again. That was her favorite phrase. Broken family. She said it with a sympathetic tilt of her head. But even then, I heard the possessiveness in it. You cannot fix something without claiming ownership of the parts. By the time I was 15, she was my stepmother. The transition from helpful neighbor to matriarch was seamless and terrifying. To the rest of the town, Loretta was a saint who had taken on a widower and a sullen teenage girl. But inside the house, the dynamic was a masterclass in subtle erasure. She never hit me. That would have been too messy, too easy to prove. Instead, she chipped away at me. She would reorganize the kitchen and throw away my mother's favorite mugs, claiming they were chipped and dangerous. She would take me shopping for school clothes, holding up dresses that were 2 sizes too big, and sigh loudly, asking the sales clerk if they had anything that could hide my difficult shape. When my father was in the room, she was sweetness and light. She would smooth my hair and call me sweetheart, but the moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the mask fell. She would look at me doing my homework at the kitchen table and tell me that boys did not like girls who were too smart, that I was going to end up alone because I was cold as ice and unnatural. I learned to survive by making myself scarce. I buried myself in textbooks and math problems because numbers did not lie and variables could be controlled. I earned a scholarship to a university 3 states away, and the day I left, Loretta cried on the front lawn, clinging to my father, sobbing about how empty the nest would be. I watched her from the passenger seat of my beat-up sedan, dry-eyed, and saw the flash of triumph in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. She had won. She had the house. She had the man. And she had successfully pushed the inconvenient reminder of his first wife out the door. I worked 2 jobs through college. I waited tables at a diner and filed papers at the university admissions office until my fingers were stained with ink. I was exhausted for 4 years straight. But I built a life. I landed the junior analyst position at Heliopath Insights right out of the gate and clawed my way up to senior specialist. I bought my own condo. I paid my own bills. I built a world where I did not have to ask anyone for permission to exist. But guilt is a hook that digs deep, and Loretta knew exactly how to pull the line. Over the last decade, the requests started coming. They were never direct demands. They were panicked phone calls to me in the middle of a Tuesday workday. Loretta would be crying, saying the roof was leaking and the insurance would not cover it, and they were short $2,000. Or Dad would get on the line, sounding embarrassed and small, mumbling about how the transmission in the truck had died, and he did not know how he was going to get to work. And then there was Grandpa Walter. That was their ace in the hole. 5 years ago, when Grandpa's health started to decline and he moved into the small bungalow on Dad's property, the requests became constant. His heart medication went up again. Sabine, Loretta would say, her voice tight with manufactured stress. It is $400 a month now. We just do not have it. I hate to ask, but I cannot let him go without it. So I sent the money. I opened my banking app and transferred $400, then $600 for a specialist visit, then $1,200 for a new water heater for his bungalow. Every single time. I transferred the money to the joint account shared by Chuck and Loretta. I stood on the icy porch and gripped my coffee mug harder, the ceramic biting into my palm. I remembered the fights. I remembered the time I asked for the pharmacy's number so I could pay them directly. "Oh, honey, no," Loretta had said, her voice dripping with condescension. "You know how Walter is. He is proud. He would be mortified if he knew his granddaughter was paying his bills. It has to come from us. He trusts us. He does not like strangers calling about his private medical issues. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie, but challenging it meant calling my father a thief or a fool, and I was not ready to do either. I told myself I was keeping the peace. I told myself that as long as Grandpa was taken care of, the delivery method did not matter. I treated my family like a bad data set. I ignored the anomalies to keep the model running. But there were cracks. There were moments when the reality bled through so clearly that I had to squeeze my eyes shut to ignore it. I remembered a Christmas 3 years ago. It was late, and the house was filled with the smell of cinnamon and pine. I had walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and found Loretta standing over Grandpa Walter, who was sitting at the small breakfast table eating a slice of pie. Her back was to me, and she did not hear my socks on the linoleum. She was leaning over him, her hands planted on the table, looming like a vulture. "You are a burden, Walter," she had hissed. The venom in her voice was so pure it shocked me into stillness. "Do you hear me? A heavy, expensive burden. Charles is working himself to death to keep you in pills and heating oil, and you just sit there and eat. You should have had the decency to go when your wife did." Grandpa had not looked up. He just kept moving his fork, his hand trembling slightly. "Loretta," I had said. My voice was barely a whisper. She spun around so fast she nearly knocked a chair over. In the span of a single second, her face transformed. The snarl vanished, replaced by a flustered, rosy-cheeked smile. "Sabine," she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. "You startled me. We were just having a serious talk about his cholesterol. He knows he should not be eating sugar this late. It is for his own good. Isn't that right, Walter?" She looked at him, her eyes wide and threatening. Grandpa finally looked up, met my gaze, and gave a small, tired shrug. "Just a bit of pie, Sabine," he had mumbled. I stood there, paralyzed. I should have screamed. I should have thrown her out of the house. But the fear of blowing up the fragile peace, of ruining Christmas for Dad, of causing a scene that would leave Grandpa even more vulnerable when I left, held me back. I swallowed the rage. I nodded and went back to bed. I hated myself for that moment. I carried the weight of that silence like a stone in my stomach. But Grandpa saw. He always saw. He was the only one who came to my graduation. Dad had car trouble, another crisis Loretta had orchestrated. But Grandpa had taken a Greyhound bus 6 hours to sit in the bleachers after the ceremony. While I was still in my cap and gown, he had hugged me. He smelled like Old Spice and peppermint. "You are the smart one, Sabine," he had whispered in my ear, holding me tight. "You are the only one in this whole damn family who looks at a column of numbers and sees the truth, not the excuse. Don't ever lose that. Don't let them dull your eyes." I looked out at the snow-covered valley, the memory of his voice sharp in my mind. For years, I had let them dull my eyes. I had let them frame the narrative. I had let Loretta paint me as the cold, ungrateful career woman while she played the martyr. I had paid for the renovations on a house I was not welcome in. I had paid for medical bills that likely never existed, funding her wardrobe and her manicures while Grandpa wore the same 3 flannel shirts for a decade. And now, we were here, in this luxurious lodge that I had paid the deposit on, trapped by snow and silence. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. This was not a holiday. This was a closing ceremony. Loretta had not brought us here to heal. She had brought us here to hide. She needed to isolate Grandpa from his neighbors, from his doctors, from anyone who might ask questions, so she could extract the last bit of value from him before discarding him. I thought about the leather folder I had seen the night before. It wasn't just medical forms. It was the endgame. She was going for power of attorney. She was going for the deed to his bungalow. She was probably trying to sign him into a state-funded facility in a different zip code so she could sell his land and keep the equity. And she needed me here, or at least needed me neutralized, so I wouldn't look too closely at the paperwork until the ink was dry. She thought I was just here to be the scapegoat, the cold stepdaughter who signed off on putting Grandpa away because she was too busy with her career to care. I took a sip of my coffee. It had gone cold, but I drank it anyway. "Not this time," I whispered to the empty air. The wind howled in response, shaking the icicles on the eaves. I was done keeping the peace. I was done being the bank account with no voice. I was done watching my father shrink until he was nothing but a shadow in his own life. I turned away from the view and looked at the sliding glass doors that led back into the lodge. Inside, Loretta was probably waking up, stretching in her silk pajamas, thinking she held all the cards. She thought she was dealing with the frightened teenager she had bullied 15 years ago. She thought she was dealing with the guilty daughter who just wanted her father to love her. She was wrong. She was dealing with a senior data analyst who specialized in fraud detection and pattern recognition. She was dealing with a woman who had just decided that the statute of limitations on her patience had officially expired. I slid the glass door open and stepped back into the warmth of the house. My boots leaving wet, heavy prints on the pristine floor. I was going to watch her. I was going to track every movement, every piece of paper, every hushed conversation. I was not going to look away, not for a single second. If she wanted to play a game of secrets in the snow, fine, but she had forgotten the most important rule of data analysis. Eventually, every variable reveals its true value, and I was going to make sure her value was calculated down to the last cent. By 8 o'clock that night, the lodge was no longer a vacation rental. It was a pressure cooker buried under 6 feet of snow. The blizzard had escalated from a scenic backdrop to a violent, living thing. The wind was screaming against the timber walls, a high-pitched shriek that vibrated in the floorboards, and the power had been flickering for the last hour, dipping the room into pockets of gray darkness before buzzing back to life. We were trapped. The road back to town was gone, erased by white drifts, and the Wi-Fi had died 20 minutes ago, cutting off the only escape route any of us had. Loretta decided this was the perfect time for forced family bonding. She was pacing the kitchen island, opening a bottle of red wine with aggressive, jerky movements. She filled her glass to the brim, then poured for Dad, splashing a little red droplets onto the pristine quartz counter. She did not wipe them up. "We are going to play a game," Loretta announced, carrying the bottle to the dining table. Her voice was too loud, pitchy with alcohol and nerves. "It is called gratitude. We go around the table, and everyone says what they are thankful for. Real things, deep things, none of that generic nonsense." She sat at the head of the table, directly opposite Grandpa Walter. I was on the side, next to Mason, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into his hoodie. Dad sat across from me, staring at his plate as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "I will start," Loretta said, swirling her wine. She looked at Dad, her eyes glassy. "I am thankful for my husband, for Charles, who works so hard to provide for us, even when the weight of the world is on his shoulders, even when he has to carry burdens that aren't really his to carry." She let that hang in the air for a second, a barbed wire gift. Dad managed a weak smile. "And," she continued, turning her gaze to me, her smile sharpened, "I am thankful that we could bring everyone together, especially you. Sabine, I know how hard the holidays are for women your age who are still searching. It must be so quiet in that condo of yours. I am just so glad we could give you a taste of a real home, even for a few days. I am thankful you have us to fall back on." The insult was wrapped in so much fake sugar, it almost gave me a cavity. I felt the muscles in my jaw lock. Under the table, my hands balled into fists on my lap. "Your turn, Charles," she commanded. Dad mumbled something about being thankful for the food and the warmth. Mason muttered that he was thankful for his Game Boy battery life, earning a sharp glare from his mother. Grandpa passed, shaking his head slowly. "Sabine," Loretta prompted, "surely you have something. Maybe you are thankful that your father is generous enough to welcome you back, despite how busy you are with your career. Maybe you are thankful that you do not have the burden of raising children or caring for a sick parent yet." The air in the room seemed to vanish. The fire crackled, a loud pop that sounded like a gunshot. "I am thankful," I said, my voice steady. That I have a job that allows me to support the people I care about. Loretta scoffed, a harsh, ugly sound. Support? Oh, honey, sending a birthday card isn't support. Being there is support. Changing bed sheets is support. Dealing with doctors is support. You throw a little focus on your spreadsheets and think you understand what it takes to keep this family running? You have no idea the sacrifices I make, especially for Walter. She pointed a manicured finger at Grandpa. I am the one dealing with his decline, Sabine, not you. You are 200 miles away living your best single life while I am the one drowning in responsibilities. Something inside me snapped. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, decisive click of a lock turning. I pay for the decline, Loretta, I said. The room went dead silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Excuse me? She said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I said, I pay for it, I repeated, looking her dead in the eye. The medication. You told me last month it was $400. I sent it. The water heater for the bungalow in October. You said it was $1,200. I sent it. The specialist appointment in August. $600. The emergency roof repair last winter. $3,500. I picked up my wine glass, not to drink, but to have something to hold. I have the bank records. Loretta, I have every transfer. So do not sit there and tell me I am not supporting this family. I have transferred nearly $10,000 to your joint account in the last 18 months alone. That is a lot of money for a daughter who supposedly does not care. Dad looked up, his face pale. Sabine, stop. Let's not talk about money. Why not? I asked, keeping my eyes on Loretta. She brought up gratitude. I am just clarifying what we should be grateful for. Loretta's face had turned a splotchy crimson. The mask of the benevolent matriarch cracked and fell away, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. You think you can buy your way out of guilt? She spat. You think throwing money at us makes you a good daughter? You treat this family like one of your little data projects, like we are a charity case you can write off on your taxes. You sit there, cold as ice, judging us, while I do the dirty work. I am not judging, I said, my voice dropping lower, calmer, which I knew would infuriate her. I am just analyzing the input and the output, and the numbers do not add up. Loretta. I leaned forward slightly. Where did the money go? Because I called the pharmacy last week to check on a prescription interaction for Grandpa. They told me he is on the generic brand now. It costs $40 a month, not $400. Where is the other $360 going every month? Loretta? Loretta slammed her hand down on the table. The silverware jumped. You are delusional, she screamed. You are a paranoid, jealous little spinster. You are making this up. I can show you the bank statements right now, I said, reaching for my phone. Stop it, Loretta shrieked. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over backward, crashing onto the hardwood floor. Charles, do you hear her? She is accusing me of stealing after everything I do. She is trying to destroy us. Sabine, please, Dad pleaded, looking like he wanted to crawl under the table. Just apologize. Let it go. No, Loretta yelled. She was vibrating with rage. She walked around the head of the table, moving toward me. She is not going to apologize. She is going to leave. I want her out. We are snowed in, Loretta, Dad said weakly. I do not care. She was looming over me now. I stood up. I wasn't going to let her tower over me. Are you recording this? Loretta demanded, her eyes darting to the phone in my hand. Is that what you're doing? Gathering evidence for your little lawyer friends? You think you're so smart. I am asking a question, I said. If the money didn't go to Grandpa, where is it? I turned to walk away. The kitchen was behind me, and the hallway to the stairs was to my left. I took a step toward the hallway, wanting to de-escalate, wanting to get away from the toxicity radiating off her. But Loretta stepped into my path. She blocked the narrow space between the heavy dining table and the timber wall. She was breathing hard, the smell of red wine and expensive perfume rolling off her in waves. Move, Loretta, I said quietly. You think you are better than me, she hissed, her face inches from mine. You always have. Just like your mother, walking around like you were royalty, leaving everyone else to clean up the mess. Do not talk about my mother, I said. Why? Because she died? Loretta laughed. A cruel, jagged sound. She left you. Sabine, she left you with a father who could not handle you. And you know what? You make your grandfather sick. You make him feel guilty every single day. I froze. What are you talking about? He looks at you, Loretta sneered, leaning in, her voice dripping with malice. And he sees her, and he hates himself for still being alive while she is rotting in the ground. You are a walking reminder that he outlived his own daughter. You are killing him just by being here. You are the reason he needs to go to that home. So we do not have to look at you and remember. The cruelty of it took my breath away. It was a precision strike, designed to hit the deepest, most painful insecurity I had. You are sick, I whispered. I tried to push past her. I didn't shove her. I just tried to squeeze through the gap to get to the stairs. My shoulder brushed hers. Loretta reacted as if I had attacked her. She wound up her arm, her eyes wide with a sudden, explosive fury, and she swung. Her palm connected with my cheek with a sound that cracked through the room like a whip. It wasn't a slap. It was a heavy, open-handed strike that carried the full weight of her body. My head snapped to the side. The force of it sent me stumbling back, my hip colliding hard with the edge of the table. The room spun. My ear rang, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the storm outside. I brought a hand up to my face, my fingers trembling. The skin felt hot, throbbing with a pulse of its own. I looked up. Loretta was standing there, her chest heaving. She didn't look sorry. She didn't look shocked. She looked satisfied. Her eyes were clear and cold. She had wanted to do that for 15 years. Loretta, Dad gasped. It was the first time he had spoken with any volume all night. He was staring at her, his mouth open, horror finally breaking through his passivity. Mason had turned his chair completely around, his back to us, his headphones pulled up over his ears as if he could block out the violence if he just ignored it hard enough. But it was Grandpa Walter who moved. He stood up. He didn't use the table for support. He didn't reach for his cane immediately. He stood up on his own two legs, shaky but upright. His face was gray, but his eyes were burning. You, Grandpa said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the silence like a razor blade. You have stepped over a line you cannot walk back from. Loretta turned to him, her lip curling. Oh, shut up, old man. I did it for us. No, Grandpa said. You did it for you. I didn't wait for more. I couldn't be in that room for another second. I turned and ran for the stairs, my boots pounding on the wood. I heard Dad call my name. Sabine, wait, but I didn't stop. I ran into the bathroom on the second floor and slammed the door, twisting the lock with fumbling fingers. I backed away until my legs hit the edge of the bathtub, and then I slid down to the floor, the cold tiles seeping through my jeans. I sat there in the dark, listening to the wind howl, listening to the blood rushing in my ears. My cheek was burning. I reached up and turned on the vanity light. I pulled myself up to the mirror. The mark was already forming, a bright, angry red imprint of a hand on my pale skin, 4 fingers and a thumb. It was undeniable. It was physical proof. I touched it gently, wincing. Loretta thought this was the end. She thought she had put me in my place. She thought she had asserted dominance and that I would cower in my room and leave in the morning, defeated. She was wrong. I stared at my reflection, at the data point blooming red on my face. This wasn't a defeat. It was evidence. Okay, I whispered to the mirror. My voice shook, but my hands steadied. Okay. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to make sure that this was the most expensive slap in history. She had put her hands on me. She had made it physical, and in doing so, she had handed me the weapon I needed to dismantle her life, brick by brick. I turned off the light and sat back down on the floor, waiting for the morning, waiting for the snow to stop, and waiting for the moment I could burn her world down. The silence in the lodge was heavy, pressing against my eardrums with a physical weight that rivaled the storm raging outside. It was 3 a.m. The wind was still battering the exposed timber of the roof, sounding like a giant hand trying to pry the structure apart, but inside, the air was stagnant and cold. I lay in the narrow twin bed of the guest loft, staring up at the vaulted ceiling where shadows danced in rhythm with the swaying trees outside the high windows. My cheek throbbed. The heat from Loretta's slap had faded into a dull, bone-deep ache that pulsed every time my heart beat. I had not slept. Sleep felt dangerous, a surrender I could not afford. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of her hand, the look of pure, unadulterated malice in her eyes, and the terrified inaction of my father. But it was not the pain keeping me awake. It was the instincts I had honed over a decade of analyzing corrupted data sets. My brain was screaming that the slap was not just an outburst, it was a symptom. Violence is rarely the first step. It is the final escalation when other control mechanisms fail. Loretta had lost control of the narrative at dinner, so she had used force. But why was the narrative so fragile? Why was she so terrified of me asking about a few $100s a month when she lived in a house filled with designer furniture? Then I heard it. A low murmur drifted up from the ground floor. It was barely audible over the wind, a low-frequency hum of voices that shouldn't have been there. Everyone had gone to bed hours ago. Mason had retreated to his room with his headphones. Dad had dragged himself upstairs looking like a ghost, and Grandpa had locked his door. I sat up, sliding the heavy down comforter off my legs. The floorboards were freezing against my bare feet. I moved to the door of my room, which I had left cracked open an inch for airflow, and listened. Voice down, Charles. Do you want to wake the whole house? It was Loretta. Her voice was a hiss, sharp and urgent. I am just saying, looking at it all laid out like this, it is a lot, my father replied. He sounded exhausted, his voice thick with the kind of fatigue that comes from compromising your soul 1 inch at a time. I slipped out of my room. The loft acted as a balcony overlooking the massive great room below. The railing was made of rough-hewn logs, providing plenty of cover if I stayed low. I crouched down, moving with the silent precision of a thief in my own family's rental, and crept toward the edge. The great room was dimly lit. The overhead chandeliers were off, but a single, high-powered camping lantern sat on the dining table. The power must have flickered out again, or maybe they kept it low to avoid waking anyone. The harsh blue-white LED light cut a cone of visibility in the darkness, illuminating the mahogany table like an interrogation room. Loretta and Dad were sitting side by side, and there, lying open in the center of the pool of light, was the black leather folder. It was gutted. Papers were spread out across the table in fan-like formations, covering the place settings where we had eaten our disastrous dinner just hours before. It looked less like a vacation activity and more like a war room. Loretta was holding a pen, tapping it rhythmically against a thick stack of documents. It is not a lot, Charles, she snapped, keeping her voice low but venomous. It is necessary. We have gone over this. The notary is booked for Tuesday morning in town. We drive down. We get Walter to sign. We get the stamp, and it is done. Once we leave this mountain, everything needs to be filed. But does he know? Dad asked. He was rubbing his face with both hands, pushing the skin up until his eyes looked hollow. I mean, really know? If I explain it to him— Explain what? Loretta cut him off. That we are drowning? That the second mortgage on our house is 3 months behind? That the credit cards are maxed out because you wanted to play stockbroker with that tech startup? No, you are not explaining anything. I pressed my forehead against the cold wood of the railing, my breath catching in my throat. The second mortgage? He does not need to understand the details. Charles, Loretta continued, her tone shifting from anger to a chilling practicality. Old people do not understand equity. They do not understand leverage. He thinks he is sitting on a gold mine, but a house is just wood and dirt unless you use it. He is signing what helps the family survive. That is all he needs to know. And Sabine? Dad asked. The mention of my name made my skin prickle. Loretta let out a short, derisive laugh. Sabine is leaving. As soon as the road's clear, she goes back to her little condo and her spreadsheets. Once Walter signs these, everything is ours. Power of attorney, the deed, the medical decisions, everything. She can pull up all the bank records she wants. She can make all the little Excel charts she likes. It won't matter. She cannot undo a legal transfer. She cannot use data to ruin us if the law says we own it. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. This wasn't just about stealing his monthly pension. This was a hostile takeover. I needed to see what was on that table. I inched forward, pressing my face into the gap between the balusters. The angle was steep, but the LED lantern was bright. My eyes, trained to scan lines of code for anomalies, locked onto the headers of the documents facing my direction. The text was upside down from my perspective, but the bold, capitalized fonts were unmistakable. Durable power of attorney, financial and medical. That was the stack Loretta was tapping. It was comprehensive. It wasn't just for emergencies. It was a total surrender of rights. Next to it was a document that made my stomach drop. Quitclaim deed. It was a property transfer form. I squinted, trying to read the property description. I recognized the address immediately. It was Grandpa's bungalow, the house he had built with my grandmother 40 years ago, the house he had promised, verbally, at least, to never sell because it was the only place he felt safe. But the third pile of papers was the one that made me bring a hand up to cover my mouth to stifle a gasp. It was a glossy brochure clipped to an application form. The logo was a stylized sun setting behind a cactus. Sunnyvale Memory Care. I could read the location printed on the bottom of the page. Scottsdale, Arizona. Arizona. They weren't just moving him to a local facility. They were shipping him 2 states away. They were exiling him to the desert, 1,000 miles from the mountains he loved, 1,000 miles from me. Loretta, Dad whispered, looking at the brochure. Arizona? It is so far. He hates the heat. He has never lived outside of Colorado. It is cheaper. Charles, Loretta hissed. Do you know what the facilities here cost? $6,000 a month. Sunnyvale is state subsidized if we transfer his assets correctly. That is why we need the deed signed first. We transfer the house to us. We wait out the look-back period, and then he goes on the state's dime. We sell the bungalow, pay off our debt, and we finally have a clean slate. It feels like we are throwing him away, Dad said, his voice trembling. We are not throwing him away, Loretta said firmly, picking up the pen and underlining something on the loan application. We are managing an asset that is depreciating. He is forgetting things. Charles, last week he forgot to turn off the stove. Next week he might burn the place down. We are saving him from himself, and we are saving ourselves from bankruptcy. She pointed to a figure on the loan application. I leaned out further, straining to see the number. It was a home equity line of credit application, secured against Grandpa's property value. Loan amount requested, $300,000. $300,000. The breath hissed out of my nose. They weren't just selling the house. They were stripping the equity out of it first, probably to pay off their own debts immediately, leaving Grandpa with nothing but a bed in a budget facility in the desert. I reached into my pajama pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I tapped the camera icon, making sure the flash was off. I had to be sure. One accidental flash and it was over. I lined up the shot through the railing. The lighting was terrible, high contrast and shadowy, but I could clearly see Loretta, the open folder, the brochure for Arizona, and the heading on the power of attorney document. Click. I took one. Click. I zoomed in on the loan amount. The image was grainy, the digital noise swarming the details, but the shape of the numbers was visible. 300. Click. I took a third one of the deed. I was about to pull back when the floorboard beneath my right foot groaned. It wasn't a loud noise. In a crowded room, no one would have heard it. But in the dead silence of the snowbound lodge, it sounded like a gunshot. Loretta's head snapped up. She looked straight at the ceiling, her eyes scanning the darkness of the loft. "What was that?" she whispered. I froze. I stopped breathing. I became a statue in the shadows. "It is just the house settling, low," Dad said nervously. "The wind, the snow load on the roof." "No," Loretta said. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the floor. She picked up the lantern, holding it high. The beam of light swung wildly, cutting through the dark, sweeping across the walls, climbing the stairs. The light hit the railing 3 feet to my left. I pressed myself flat against the floor, burying my face in the carpet, praying that the thick log beams of the railing would hide me. The light swept over my head, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. "I heard something," she insisted. She walked toward the base of the stairs. "Loretta, please," Dad said, grabbing her arm. "It is 3 a.m. Sabine is asleep. Mason is asleep. You are jumpy. Sit down. Let's just finish this so we can hide the papers." She hesitated at the bottom step. I could hear her breathing. I imagined her looking up, debating whether to climb the stairs and check the rooms. If she came up, she would see me. If she saw me, the pretense of civility would be gone entirely. I was the only witness to a crime in progress. "Fine," she spat, turning back to the table. "But we are hiding these in the safe tonight, not your bag, the wall safe in the master bedroom. I am not taking chances." I waited until I heard them shuffling papers, the sound of zippers closing, and the heavy tread of their footsteps moving toward the master bedroom on the main floor. Only then did I dare to move. I crawled back to my room on my hands and knees, not trusting my feet. I slipped inside and closed the door, leaning against it, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I scrambled onto the bed and pulled the duvet over my head, creating a tent of darkness. I unlocked my phone. The photos were dark, blurry, and terrifying. But I needed more. I opened my banking app. I had checked it 1,000 times before, but I had always looked at the sent column. I had never scrutinized the received side of the equation because I trusted my father. I scrolled back through 3 years of history. Every check I had deposited, every Zelle transfer I had sent for Grandpa's meds or roof repair. I tapped on the transaction details for the $3,500 I had sent last winter. Recipient: C&L. Mercer Joint, K. King. I checked the $400 for the heart medication. Recipient: C&L. Mercer Joint, K. King. I checked a transfer from 2 years ago, a birthday gift, of $500 I had sent specifically for Grandpa to buy a new fishing rod. Recipient: C&L. Mercer Joint, Che King. There was no trust account. There was no Walter Mercer Care Fund. It was a slush fund. My money, my hard-earned salary, the hours I spent staring at screens until my eyes burned, had gone straight into the same account they used to pay their mortgage, their car notes, and Loretta's designer sweaters. I lowered the phone. The glow of the screen illuminated the bruise on my cheek in the reflection of the dark window across the room. It looked purple now, ugly and spreading. The pieces clicked together with the cold precision of a solved algorithm. The slap wasn't an accident. It wasn't just anger. It was a desperate attempt to silence a shareholder who was asking to see the books. The healing trip wasn't about family. It was a tactical extraction. They brought us here because the weather forecast predicted a blizzard. They brought us here to trap Grandpa in a place where he couldn't call his neighbor, couldn't walk to the store, and couldn't ask for help. They brought me here because they thought I would be the passive witness, the rubber stamp they could guilt into compliance. They were going to steal his house, steal his dignity, and ship him off to die in a discount facility in Arizona while they paid off their gambling debts or bad investments with his legacy. And I was the funding source they intended to tap until the well ran dry. I touched my cheek again. The pain was sharp, clarifying. I wasn't just a victim of domestic assault anymore. I was the lead witness in a felony fraud investigation. I lay back on the pillow, clutching the phone to my chest. I didn't sleep. I watched the gray light of dawn slowly filter into the room, and with every brightening minute, the fear in my gut hardened into something else. They wanted a signature. They wanted to close the deal. I was going to make sure they got a closing they never saw coming. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to document every single step they took toward the cliff edge, and when they finally jumped, thinking they were flying, I was going to be the one waiting at the bottom with the evidence to catch them. The knock on my door was so faint I almost missed it. A soft, rhythmic tap that sounded more like a branch brushing against the window pane than a human hand. It was 6:30 in the morning. The sun had not yet crested the peaks, leaving the room bathed in a pale, spectral blue light. I slid out of bed, wincing as the movement pulled at the skin on my cheek. I moved to the door and opened it an inch, expecting to see Mason looking for a charger, or perhaps my father coming to deliver a whispered, guilt-ridden apology while Loretta was still asleep. It was Grandpa Walter. He was fully dressed. He wore his heavy wool coat, a scarf neatly knotted at his throat, and his flat cap pulled low over his forehead. He was leaning on his cane, but not in the way he usually did when Loretta was around. He wasn't putting his weight on it. He was holding it like a weapon, or perhaps a scepter. His eyes, usually clouded with the vague detachment he wore like armor, were clear, sharp, and burning with an intelligence I hadn't seen in years. "Get your boots, Sabine," he whispered. His voice was steady, devoid of the tremulous rasp he often used at dinner. "Let's go for a walk before your stepmother wakes up and starts staging the pancakes for her Instagram followers." I stared at him for a second, stunned by the transformation. The confused, shuffling old man I had worried about for the last 48 hours had vanished, replaced by the grandfather I remembered from my childhood, the man who had built his own contracting business from nothing. "Grandpa?" I whispered back. "It is freezing out there." "The cold wakes you up," he said, a small, wry smile touching the corner of his mouth. "Hurry up. We do not have much time before the show starts." 5 minutes later, we were crunching through the fresh powder behind the lodge. The snow was deep, coming up to my calves, but the storm had broken. The sky was a piercing, cloudless blue, and the air was so crisp it felt like inhaling crushed diamonds. We walked in silence until the lodge was just a dark shape in the distance, hidden behind a screen of thick pines. Only then did Walter stop. He turned to face me, planting his cane firmly in the snow. He reached out a gloved hand and gently, ever so gently, tilted my chin up toward the light. He looked at the bruise on my cheek. It had bloomed overnight into an ugly purple mark, the shape of Loretta's fingers clearly defined against my pale skin. "Who did this?" he asked. It wasn't a question of curiosity. It was a demand for confirmation. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat feeling like a stone. "Grandpa, it was an accident. We were arguing, and things got heated." "Sabine," he cut me off, "do not insult me. I might be old, but I am not blind. Despite what I let that woman believe, who hit you?" I looked into his eyes and saw a fierce protectiveness that broke my composure. "Loretta," I whispered. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive motion. "I thought so. I heard the yelling. I heard the slap. But I needed to hear you say it. I needed to know you were done protecting them." "I am not protecting them," I said, my voice gaining strength. "I am gathering evidence. I took pictures last night. Grandpa, they were going through papers, a power of attorney, a quitclaim deed, an application for a memory care facility in Arizona." Walter looked out at the mountains, his expression unreadable. "Arizona," he murmured. "Scottsdale, I imagine. Loretta always liked the idea of the desert. She thinks dry heat is classy." "You knew?" I asked, shocked by his calm. He turned back to me. "I suspected. She has been leaving brochures on the coffee table for months. Accidentally, of course. But Sabine, why do you think I insisted you come on this trip? Do you think I believed her nonsense about family bonding? I knew exactly what this was. It was a siege." He stepped closer, lowering his voice even though we were the only two souls for miles. "I brought you here because you are the only person in this family who understands that a contract is a weapon. your father. Charles is a good man, but he is weak. He sees what he wants to see. He thinks if he just stays quiet, the storm will pass. But you? You look at the numbers. You read the fine print. He reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a thin, folded envelope. It wasn't the crisp, legal-sized folders Loretta used. It was old, slightly yellowed, and smelled of cedar and tobacco. "Loretta thinks I'm losing my mind," he said, tapping the envelope against his palm. "And to be fair, I have let her think it. It is amazing what you can get away with when people think you are senile. You can listen to conversations they think you do not understand. You can lose your reading glasses right when a document is put in front of you. You can spill coffee on a signature line and apologize for your shaking hands. You have been faking it?" I stared at him, my mouth falling open. "Not all of it," he admitted with a sigh. "I forget names sometimes. My knees hurt. I get tired faster than I used to. But my mind, the part of me that knows right from wrong and profit from loss, that is still here." He handed me the envelope. "Every month, she tries to get me to sign something," he continued. "A transfer of funds, a change in beneficiary. She waits until I have taken my sleeping pill, or until I am dozing in the chair. I play the confused old man. I say, 'Oh, Loretta, I cannot read this without my good glasses,' or 'Let me look at it in the morning,' and then I slip the paper into my pocket and tell her I lost it. Or I make a photocopy at the library when I go for my walks and put the original back." I opened the envelope. Inside was a document dated 6 years ago. It was a living trust. My eyes scanned the pages, the legal jargon familiar and comforting. The Walter Mercer Revocable Trust. I flipped to the section on beneficiaries. I expected to see my father's name. I expected to see a standard split. Instead, I saw my name. Primary beneficiary and executor, Sabine Mercer. Assets included: the real property located at address of the bungalow, all savings accounts, and investment portfolios. There was a specific clause, bolded and initialed: exclusion of Charles and Loretta Mercer. "Grandpa," I breathed, "you cut them out? 6 years ago?" "I did not want to," he said, his voice heavy with a sorrow that seemed to age him 10 years in a second. "Charles is my son. A father wants to leave something for his son, but I watched her. Sabine, I watched how she spent money she did not earn. I watched how she looked at my house not as a home, but as a pile of equity to be mined. If I left it to Charles, she would have drained it dry in a year. She views every dollar I saved as lipstick for an audience that does not even exist." He poked the paper with a gloved finger. "That document is filed with my attorney in the city, the real attorney, not the strip mall notary Loretta uses, but this copy. This is for you, to remind you that you are not fighting for scraps. You are fighting for something that is already yours." I held the paper to my chest, tears pricking my eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to give Charles a chance," he said simply. "I kept hoping he would stand up. I kept hoping he would stop her. But last night," he looked at my cheek again, his jaw tightening. "Last night, he watched her hit you, and he did nothing. That was his last chance." He reached into his other pocket. "I have one more thing," he said. "I could not sleep last night. The Wi-Fi was out. But I have a data plan on my tablet. Loretta does not know I know how to use it. She thinks I use it for solitaire." He pulled out a folded printout. It was a screenshot of a travel confirmation page. "I booked a ticket," he said. "One way, leaving from the regional airport in the city tomorrow afternoon, right after we are scheduled to meet this notary of hers." I looked at the printout. Passenger name, blank. "I left the name field open on the confirmation draft," he said. "But I bought the seat. It is a ticket out of here, a ticket away from this house, away from this toxic mess." "For you?" I asked. "Are you leaving?" "No," he said firmly. "I am not running away from my own home. This ticket, it is for the person who does not belong in this family anymore. It is for the person who needs to go." He looked at me, his eyes steel gray and demanding. I have been playing defense for 5 years. Sabine, I am tired. I am ready to go on the offense, but I cannot do it alone. I need a partner, someone who knows how to close the trap." He gestured to the snowy path leading back to the lodge. "We are going to go back in there. We are going to eat her pancakes. We are going to let her think she has won. We are going to let her drive us to the notary tomorrow, and when we get there, we are going to decide whose name goes on this ticket." I looked at the trust document in my hand, then at the screenshot of the plane ticket, and finally at the old man standing tall in the snow. For years, I had felt alone. I had felt like the outsider, the cold analyst, the ungrateful daughter. But standing there in the shadow of the pines, I realized I had never been alone. He had been watching. He had been planning. He had been waiting for me to be ready. "Okay," I said. The word came out as a cloud of white mist. "We go on offense." "Good," Walter said. He tapped his cane on the ground, shattering a layer of ice. "Now, hide those papers and wipe that smart look off your face. When we walk through that door, I need you to be scared. I need you to be the beaten-down granddaughter who just wants to make peace. Can you do that?" "I can do that," I said. "And I," he said, settling his weight back onto the cane and letting his posture slump until he looked 20 years older, "will be the confused old man who just wants his morning coffee. Let's go. Sabine, it is time to give them exactly what they think they want." We walked back toward the lodge, 2 conspirators moving through the snow. The sun was fully up now, glaring off the white drifts, but the cold didn't bother me anymore. I felt a fire burning in my chest, fueled by the trust document hidden against my ribs and the absolute certainty that when that one-way plane took off tomorrow, I would not be the one sitting in the seat, back in the sanctuary of the loft. I locked the door and leaned against the wood. Exhaling a breath I felt I had been holding since I walked out into the snow with Grandpa Walter. My hands were cold, but they were steady. The trembling fear from the night before had evaporated, replaced by the cold, clinical focus I used when I was scrubbing a corrupted data set at work. I moved to the small desk by the window where the morning sun was slicing through the glass. I took the envelope Walter had given me and laid the trust document out on the flat surface. I smoothed the creases with the side of my hand. I did not just take a picture, I built a file. I used my phone to photograph every single page. I focused on the corners, ensuring the page numbers were visible. I zoomed in on the notary stamp from 6 years ago. Capturing the expiration date and the commission number, I took 3 shots of the signature page, 1 wide, 1 macro of Walter's shaky but distinct handwriting, and 1 of the date. This document was the shield. It proved that Walter was of sound mind when he decided to protect his assets from the very people currently sleeping downstairs. Once the images were secured in a password-protected folder, I opened my contacts and scrolled until I found the name I needed: Riley Torres. Riley and I had survived Statistics 101 together freshman year. Now, she was a partner at a boutique firm in the city that specialized in elder law and financial abuse litigation. She was the kind of lawyer who wore bright floral blazers to court and then gutted the opposition with a smile. I sent a text. "I need you. Urgent. Financial exploitation and physical assault involving Grandpa. Are you free?" I attached the photos of the trust and the blurry shots I had taken of the papers in the lodge last night. The 3 dots appeared on the screen almost instantly. Then, my phone buzzed. "Sabine?" Riley's voice was warm, the familiar tone of a friend, but I cut right through the pleasantries. "I am at a lodge in Redwood Summit," I said, keeping my voice low. "Loretta and Dad are here. They have paperwork, power of attorney, a quitclaim deed for the bungalow, and an application for a facility in Arizona. They are planning to make him sign tomorrow morning." There was a pause on the line, the kind of silence where you can hear a professional shifting gears. When Riley spoke again, the warmth was gone. Her voice was razor-sharp, stripped of all college nostalgia. "Is he willing?" she asked. "No, he is terrified. He has been hiding original documents to stall them, and Riley, Loretta hit me last night." "She what?" The question cracked like a whip. She slapped me, hard, during an argument about money. I have a bruise covering half my cheek. Okay, listen to me very carefully, Riley said. We are no longer in the realm of a family dispute. We are discussing criminal assault and conspiracy to commit fraud against a vulnerable adult. I need you to stop being a granddaughter and start being an investigator. Can you do that? Yes, I said. Tell me what you need. Documentation. Riley listed. I need clear, high-resolution photos of your face. Right now, before it starts to fade or change color, send them to me. Second, I need evidence of the coercion. You said they are making him sign tomorrow? That gives us 24 hours to build a case for an emergency protective order. I can get more photos of the documents, I said. Good, but I need more than paper. I need intent, Riley said. Check the laws for Colorado. It is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. That means as long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it without telling them. I want you to record everything. Breakfast, lunch, casual chats. Bait her. Sabine, get her to admit what the money is for. Get her to admit that Walter does not understand what he is signing. I can do that, I said, feeling a cold thrill of purpose. And Sabine? Riley's voice softened slightly. Do not engage physically. If she comes at you again, you leave. No piece of evidence is worth your safety. But if she talks, let her dig her own grave. I hung up and immediately checked the state statutes just to be absolutely certain. Riley was right. Colorado Revised Statutes 18-9-304. One-party consent. I was the party. I consented. I walked into the bathroom and took the selfies Riley requested. The bruise was ugly, a mottled map of purple and yellow blooming across my cheekbone. It looked painful, and it was. But looking at it in the digital viewfinder, I didn't feel shame. I felt validation. It was tangible proof that the woman downstairs had lost control. I pocketed my phone, opened the voice memo app, and set it to record. I slid the phone into the front pocket of my hoodie, microphone facing out. Then, I went downstairs to play the role of the defeated stepdaughter. The lodge kitchen smelled of bacon and burnt toast. Loretta was standing at the stove, flipping pancakes with aggressive cheerfulness. She was wearing a thick cable-knit sweater and pearl earrings, looking for all the world like the perfect mountain hostess. Dad was sitting at the island, staring into a mug of coffee, looking gray and diminished. "Good morning," Loretta chirped when she saw me. She scanned my face, her eyes lingering on the bruise for a fraction of a second before she smiled. It was a dare. She was daring me to mention it. "I hope you slept well. The wind was terrible last night." "I slept okay," I said, keeping my voice quiet, submissive. I pulled out a stool and sat down, keeping my posture slumped. I wanted to apologize for last night. Loretta, I was tired. I shouldn't have raised my voice." Loretta froze mid-flip. She turned to Dad, her eyebrows raised in triumph. "See, Charles," she said. "I told you she would come around. Sabine is a smart girl. She knows when she is out of line." She turned back to me, her smile beatific. "Apology accepted. Honey, we are all under stress. Families fight. It is how we make up that matters." "I just worry," I said, leaning my elbows on the counter, leaning closer to the phone in my pocket. "About the money. You know, if Grandpa signs those papers tomorrow, I just want to make sure the house is safe. Is the loan really necessary?" Loretta laughed, a dismissive, tinkling sound. "Oh, Sabine, you and your little worries. The loan is just bridge financing. It is a financial tool. You would not understand the nuances of real estate leverage." "But $300,000 is a lot of leverage," I said, throwing the number out to see if she would correct me. She didn't. "It takes money to make money," she said, plating a stack of pancakes. "We have investment opportunities. Sabine, Charles and I have been looking at a franchise, a fresh start. And frankly, Walter's house is just sitting there, rotting. It is dead capital. Why shouldn't it help the people who are actually alive and building a future?" So the money is for a franchise? I asked, keeping my tone full of naive curiosity. I thought it was for his care. It is all the same pot, isn't it? Loretta snapped, a hint of irritation breaking through. If we are successful, we can take better care of him. It is trickle-down economics, sweetheart. Besides, the paperwork is just a formality. Walter does not need to worry his pretty little head about interest rates or amortization schedules. It would just confuse him. The notary knows the drill. We get the stamp, we file the deed, and we move on. And the facility in Arizona? I pressed. Is that part of the plan? Loretta paused. She put the spatula down. Who told you about Arizona? She asked sharply. I saw a brochure on the table, I lied smoothly. It looked nice. It is nice, Loretta said, relaxing. And it is necessary. He cannot stay in that bungalow alone. He leaves the stove on. He forgets things. Arizona is warm. It is cheaper. And honestly, Sabine, I have found a way to ensure we do not have to live off Charles's pathetic salary and your little charity handouts anymore. Once the deed is in my name, we control the asset. We control the timeline. I am done begging you for help. In your name? I asked. Not Dad's? Joint tenancy, she said, waving a hand. But I manage the details. Charles is too soft. He would let that old man squat there until the place fell down around his ears. Someone has to be the adult. I felt the phone vibrating in my pocket against my chest. Got you. Breakfast is ready, she called out, her voice returning to its high, performative pitch as Mason shuffled into the room. My half-brother looked terrible. He was wearing the same hoodie he had worn for 3 days, his eyes bloodshot from staring at screens. He slumped onto a stool next to me, ignoring the food. Morning, Mason, I said. He grunted. Pass the syrup. I watched him for a moment. He was 17, awkward, and completely checked out. He was Loretta's son, but he was also a victim of her narcissism in his own way. He was an accessory to her image, a prop she wheeled out when she needed to look like a devoted mother, and ignored the rest of the time. I made a conscious decision right then. I would not ask him questions. I would not ask him to corroborate the slap. I would not try to turn him against his mother. That was Loretta's game, using people as pawns. I was building a case based on facts, documents, and confessions. I didn't need to drag a teenager into the crossfire to win. Eat up, Loretta commanded, sliding a plate in front of him. We have a big day of packing ahead of us. We leave first thing tomorrow for the appointment. Whatever, Mason mumbled. Halfway through breakfast, Loretta's phone rang. She looked at the screen, frowned, and stood up. I have to take this. It is the realtor, she said, bustling out of the room toward the deck, leaving her purse sitting on the counter. The black leather folder was peeking out of the top. I waited 5 seconds. Dad was staring into his coffee, lost in his own misery. Mason was drowning his pancakes in syrup. I stood up. I need more coffee, I said casually. I walked around the island. I moved quickly. I pulled the folder out of her bag just enough to expose the documents inside. I didn't take them out. That would be too risky. I just spread the top edges. I pulled my phone out, keeping it low. Click. The loan application with Dad's signature already on it. Click. The filled-out transfer deed, listing Loretta Mercer as the grantee. Click. A handwritten note clipped to the back. Notary fee, $200 cash, rush job. I slid the folder back into the bag and poured myself a cup of coffee, just as the sliding door opened and Loretta came back in. Useless people, she muttered. No one wants to work on a holiday week. She looked at me. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through Instagram on my phone, or so she thought. I was actually uploading the new photos to the encrypted cloud folder Riley had set up for me. By noon, the atmosphere in the lodge had shifted. Loretta was manic, packing boxes and giving orders, high on the anticipation of her victory. She treated Grandpa Walter like a piece of luggage, patting him on the head and talking about him in the third person while he sat by the fire. He is going to be so much happier when this is all settled, she told Dad while folding blankets. Less for him to worry about. I sat in the corner, working on my laptop. To them, It looked like I was catching up on work emails. In reality, I was transcribing the audio recording from breakfast, time-stamping the admission about the bridge financing and the plan to control the asset. Riley texted me at 2 in the afternoon. I have the draft ready. Petition for emergency guardianship and a temporary restraining order freezing all assets. I am basing it on the threat of imminent financial loss and the physical assault. I have a judge on rotation who hates elder fraud. We are going to file the second the courthouse opens tomorrow. I typed back, they are leaving at 8 in the morning. The appointment is at 9:30. Riley, let them go. Let them walk into the notary's office. We need them to attempt to execute the documents. It proves intent. If we stop them before they leave the house, they can claim it was just a discussion. If they are sitting at the table with the pen in hand, it is fraud. I looked up from the screen. Loretta was humming to herself as she taped up a box. She looked happy. She looked like a woman who had successfully navigated all the obstacles and was just waiting to collect her prize. She had no idea that every word she spoke, every paper she touched, and every threat she made was currently being compiled into a PDF file named Mercer Via's Mercer Evidence. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel angry at her. Anger is hot and messy. What I felt was cold and precise. I was a spider sitting in the center of a web that she had spent years spinning, and she was so busy admiring the silk that she didn't notice I had cut the anchor lines. I looked over at Grandpa Walter. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible wink. He knew. The trap was set. The bait was taken. Now, we just had to wait for the steel jaws to snap shut. The final dinner of the trip was a production that would have made a Broadway stage manager nervous. By 6 o'clock in the evening, Loretta had transformed the rustic dining table of the lodge into a spread that belonged in a lifestyle magazine. There were linen napkins she had brought from home, silver candle holders that looked dangerously out of place next to the rough-hewn timber walls, and a roast that filled the air with the scent of rosemary and expensive ambition. She had ordered us all to dress up, not just nice sweaters, but cocktail attire, as if we were attending a gala instead of eating a nervous meal in a snowed-in rental. I wore a black dress I had packed for a potential client dinner that never happened. It was severe, professional, and felt like armor. I watched Loretta from the kitchen archway. She was vibrating with a frantic energy, adjusting the centerpiece, straightening forks, and casting furtive glances toward the hallway where Grandpa Walter's suitcase sat near the door. Ready for the morning departure. I saw her eyes linger on the leather handle of his bag. Checking. Verifying that the papers she coveted were still within her reach. She looked like a predator ensuring the trap was still sprung before she sat down to eat the bait. "Everyone, sit," Loretta announced, clapping her hands. "Come on, the light is perfect right now. I want a picture before we cut the meat." We shuffled to the table. Dad looked like a man walking to the gallows in a collared shirt that was too tight around the neck. Mason had compromised by wearing a button-down over a t-shirt, his headphones resting around his neck like a life preserver. Grandpa Walter moved slowly, leaning heavily on his cane, playing his role to perfection. He looked frail. He looked confused. He looked exactly like the victim Loretta needed him to be. I sat across from her. I could feel the weight of my phone in the pocket of my dress. The voice memo app was already running, the red timer ticking away silently against my thigh. "To us," Loretta said, raising her wine glass. Her eyes glittered in the candlelight. "To a trip that started rocky, but is ending with clarity, to family, and to new beginnings. I really feel like we are turning a page. Don't you, Charles?" Dad muttered something that sounded like agreement and drank half his glass in one swallow. "And to Walter," Loretta added, turning her smile on him. It was a terrifying expression. All teeth and no warmth. "For being so cooperative, we are going to get you settled. Walter, we are going to make sure everything is taken care of." She set her glass down and reached under the table. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. She pulled out a slim stack of papers and a heavy, expensive-looking pen. She slid them across the mahogany surface toward Grandpa, pushing them right next to his plate of roast beef. "Since we are all here and relaxed," she said, her voice breezy and light, "I thought we could just get the boring stuff out of the way. It is just the medical update forms I mentioned. Walter, remember? The doctor needs updated emergency contacts and permission for the new insurance filing. We need to have them ready for the notary in town tomorrow morning so we do not waste time." The room went still. I saw Dad flinch, his eyes darting to the papers and then away, unable to look his father in the face. Grandpa Walter stared at the papers. He blinked rapidly, patting his pockets with trembling hands. "My glasses," he murmured, his voice thin and wavering. I seem to have left my reading glasses in the bedroom. Loretta, I cannot make out the small print." Loretta's smile faltered for a microsecond before snapping back into place. "Oh, Walter, you do not need to read the fine print right now. It is standard. Just standard boilerplate. You know I would never give you anything that wasn't routine. Just sign by the little sticky tabs I put there." She pointed to the yellow flags fluttering on the bottom of the pages. "I do not know," Grandpa said, pushing the papers slightly away. "I do not like signing things I cannot see. Charles, can you read it to me?" Dad looked like he might be sick. He opened his mouth, closed it, and reached for his wine glass again. "Charles is eating." "Walter," Loretta snapped, her patience fraying at the edges. "Honestly, it is just a HIPAA release and a beneficiary update for the insurance. Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" "I can look at it," I said. My voice was soft, helpful. I leaned forward, keeping my face open and innocent. "I have perfect vision, Loretta, and I handle contracts at work all the time. Let me just scan it for him so he feels comfortable. Then we can eat." Loretta stiffened. Her hand shot out, covering the papers. "That is not necessary. Sabine, this is private medical information. It is between Walter and his caregivers. You are not involved." "But I am family," I said, echoing the words she had used against me 1,000 times. "And you said this trip was about transparency, right? About coming together? If it is just a medical form, why can I not read it to him? Unless there is something in there you do not want me to see?" I let the question hang in the air. I let silence do the heavy lifting. Dad looked up, his eyes wide. Even Mason looked up from his plate. Loretta was trapped. If she refused, she looked guilty. If she agreed, she was exposed. She gambled that I would gloss over the details to keep the peace, or that she could bully me into silence if I saw something I didn't like. "Fine," she spat, pulling her hand back as if the paper burned her. "Read it, but make it quick. The food is getting cold." I reached out and took the stack. The paper felt heavy, expensive. I slid the first page over. It was not a medical update. I took a breath, centering myself. I needed to be precise. I needed every word to be clear for the recording. "This is titled, 'Durable General Power of Attorney,'" I read aloud. My voice was cool, devoid of emotion. The voice of a data analyst reading a quarterly report. "That is standard for medical care," Loretta interjected quickly. "Keep reading." "It grants the agent," I continued, ignoring her, "full and unlimited authority to manage, sell, transfer, and liquidate all assets belonging to the principal." I looked up. "Assets," I said clearly. "Not medical records. Assets." I flipped the page. Article 3, Section 4. I read, "The agent is explicitly authorized to sell, convey, lease, or mortgage any real estate currently owned by the principal, including but not limited to the property located at 42 Maple Drive." I paused and looked at Dad. "Dad, isn't 42 Maple Drive Grandpa's bungalow?" Dad dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Loretta," he whispered, "you said this was for the insurance." "It is for everything," Loretta said, her voice rising. "It is a comprehensive package. Charles, don't be dense." I flipped to the next document in the stack. "And this," I said, "is a promissory note and deed of trust. It outlines a secured loan in the amount of $300,000, with the property at 42 Maple Drive used as collateral. The interest rate is 8%. The first payment is due 30 days after signing. I looked at Loretta. She was gripping her wine glass so hard her knuckles were white. 8%? I asked. That is a hard money loan. Loretta, that is not a bank mortgage. That is predatory lending. Why is Grandpa taking out a high-interest loan on a house he owns free and clear? Give me those, Loretta snarled. She stood up, reaching across the table to snatch the papers back. I pulled them out of her reach, pressing them flat against the table with my hand. And here, I said, lifting the final page, is an admission agreement for Sunnyvale Memory Care in Scottsdale, Arizona. It lists the resident's payment method as pending Medicaid spend-down. I looked at Grandpa Walter. He was staring at his plate, his face a mask of tragic confusion, but under the table, I saw his foot tap against the leg of my chair, a signal. Keep going. So, I said, turning to look fully at Loretta. Just to be clear, you wanted him to sign a document giving you the right to sell his home, take out a $300,000 loan in his name, and ship him to Arizona on a Medicaid bed? And you told him it was an update for his doctor? You are twisting it, Loretta screamed. The veneer of the sophisticated hostess shattered completely. You are reading it out of context. You are acting like you are in some courtroom drama. Sabine, stop performing. I am reading the text, Loretta, I said. Text does not have context. It has definitions. The definition of this is fraud. It is not fraud, she yelled. It is survival. Do you have any idea what it costs to run this family? Do you? No. You sit in your condo with your perfect job and your perfect salary and you judge us. You send your little checks and think you are a saint. $300,000 is nothing compared to what I have done for him. What you have done? I asked quietly. Loretta, you just tried to trick him into selling his house. It is my house, she roared. She was standing now, looming over the table, her face twisted into a rictus of rage. I earned it. I have cooked his meals. I have washed his sheets. I have driven him to every appointment while you were too busy being important. I have sacrificed 15 years of my life for this ungrateful family. I deserve that equity. I deserve to be paid back. Paid back for what? I asked. For being a wife? For being a daughter-in-law? For being the only one who handles the mess, she screamed. Charles is useless. Look at him. She gestured violently at Dad, who was shrinking into his chair. He cannot make a decision to save his life. He put us in debt. He lost our savings on that stupid tech stock. I am the one who found a way out. I am the one who found the lender. I am the one fixing this. By stealing from his father? I asked. It is not stealing if he is family, Loretta argued, her logic spiraling into pure entitlement. It is family resources. It all goes into the same pot. When he dies, who gets it anyway? Us. I am just accessing it early. I am just accelerating the inheritance so we can survive today. He does not need a 3-bedroom house. He needs a bed and a nurse. I am doing him a favor. By lying to him? I pressed. By telling him it was a medical form? He would not understand the loan, Loretta shouted. He is old. He is stubborn. If I told him we needed money, he would give me a lecture about saving pennies. I did what I had to do to get the signature. That is what leaders do. Sabine, they make the hard choices that weak people like you are too afraid to make. So you admit you intended to mislead him to get the signature? I asked. It was the golden question. The question Riley would have asked on cross-examination. I admit I am the only person in this room with the guts to save this family from bankruptcy, Loretta declared, slamming her hand on the table. And if I have to tell a little white lie to get a piece of paper signed so we do not lose our own house, then yes, I did it, and I would do it again, because I am entitled to it. The silence that followed was absolute. The echo of her scream hung in the air, bouncing off the timber walls. Dad was staring at her with horror, as if seeing a stranger wearing his wife's face. Mason had taken his headphones off completely, his mouth agape. And Grandpa Walter? He slowly lifted his head. The confusion was gone. He looked at Loretta with a clarity that should have terrified her. "I heard you," he said softly. Loretta whipped her head toward him, breathing hard. "Good. Maybe now you understand. I am doing this for us. Walter." "No," I said, standing up. I picked up the papers. I folded them neatly, deliberately. "You are doing this for you, and you just explained exactly how." "Give me those," Loretta demanded, reaching for the stack. I didn't pull away this time. I locked eyes with her. "No," I said. "I am keeping these, for safekeeping, until we get to the notary." Loretta laughed, a jagged, hysterical sound. "You think you can stop me? You think holding on to a piece of paper changes anything? We are going to town tomorrow. He's going to sign, because if he doesn't, Charles goes bankrupt. Is that what you want? Walter, do you want your son on the street?" She turned her gaze on Dad, wielding his failure like a knife. "Tell him, Charles, tell him we need the money. Tell him to sign." Dad looked at Loretta, then he looked at me, then he looked at his father. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma to find his house on fire. Dad started, his voice cracking. "Tell him," Loretta shrieked. I interrupted, my voice calm, cutting through the hysteria, "that we should finish dinner. We have a big day tomorrow." I sat back down. I placed the papers under my plate. I picked up my fork and cut a piece of the roast beef. "It is delicious, Loretta," I said. "Truly, a meal to remember." Loretta stared at me, her chest heaving. She looked at the papers trapped under my china plate. She looked at the phone in my pocket. Though she didn't know it was recording, she realized she couldn't physically fight me for them, not with Mason watching, not after the slap. She sneered, adjusted her silk blouse, and sat down. "Fine," she hissed. "Eat, enjoy it, because tomorrow, things change." She poured herself another glass of wine, filling it to the rim, her hands shaking with rage. I took a bite of the meat. It tasted like ash, but I swallowed it. I felt the phone against my leg, the recording still running, capturing the sound of her angry breathing, the clink of silverware, and the heavy, damning silence of a family that had just been shattered by the truth. She had climbed up on the witness stand, sworn herself in, and confessed to everything. All I had to do now was make sure the jury, or the judge, heard the tape. I waited until the house had settled into a heavy, uneasy silence before I made my move. It was past 1 a.m. My father had retreated to the master bedroom, likely to drown his conscience in another glass of wine, and Loretta had marched upstairs with the air of a general who had just quelled a rebellion. She thought the argument at dinner was the climax, the final explosive release of tension before her inevitable victory. She had no idea it was merely the opening statement. I crept down the hallway to Grandpa Walter's room on the ground floor. I didn't knock this time. We had established a silent rhythm. I turned the handle slowly, slipping inside and pressing the door shut behind me until the latch clicked softly. The room was dark, save for the blue-white glow of a tablet screen illuminating Grandpa's face. He was sitting up in bed, propped against 2 pillows, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. He didn't look like a victim. He didn't look like the confused geriatric he played for Loretta's audience. He looked like a man playing 3-dimensional chess while his opponent was still trying to figure out how the knight moved. "Is she asleep?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "I think so," I whispered, pulling the desk chair closer to the bed. "She thinks she won. Grandpa, she thinks because I put the papers back under the plate and finished my roast beef, she broke me." "Good," Walter said, tapping the screen of his tablet. "Arrogance is the best blindfold money can buy. She is so busy looking at the prize, she does not see the cliff." He turned the tablet toward me. "Look at this." I leaned in. It was a confirmation page for a flight booking on a budget airline. Departure, Redwood Regional Airport. Arrival, Denver International. Date, tomorrow. Time, 2:30 p.m. Ticket type, one way. I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. The flight left from the small regional airstrip 20 miles down the mountain, heading to the city where Riley practiced law and where the main courthouse was located. "Grandpa," I said, keeping my voice hushed, "you are leaving? You are going to run?" I felt a surge of protective panic. "You do not have to do that. I can drive you. We can leave right now. If you get on a plane alone—" "Sabine, stop," he interrupted, his hand firm on my arm. "Look at the passenger name." I looked again. The field for the passenger name was filled in, but my eyes had glossed over it in my haste. It didn't say Walter Mercer. It said Loretta Mercer. I blinked, confused. "I do not understand. Why would you buy a ticket for Loretta? She is not going anywhere. She thinks she is driving us to the notary in town tomorrow." Walter took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "This ticket isn't a travel plan. Sabine, it is a prophecy, and it is a lever." He set the tablet down on the duvet. "I sat here tonight thinking about what you said at dinner. You called it a closing ceremony. You were right. This trip was supposed to be the end of my life as I know it. She wanted to ship me off to Arizona and erase me. But looking at that snow out there, I realized something. Someone is leaving this family tomorrow. Someone is getting on a transport and not coming back. But it is not going to be me." He looked at me, his eyes hard and bright. "I bought this seat because when we get to the city, when the gavel comes down, I want there to be an immediate, physical exit strategy available. Not for me, for her." "You want to send her away?" I asked. "I want to evict her," he corrected. "From my life, from my house, from my son's bank account. This ticket is symbolic. It is a message that says her ride is over. But we have to get her to the airport first. We have to get her to the city." "She won't go," I said, shaking my head. "She has the notary appointment here in Redwood Summit at 9:30. She wants to sign the papers, file them at the local county clerk, and then drive back home victorious. She will never agree to fly to the city." "She will if she thinks it is the only way to get her money," Walter said. We spent the next hour refining the narrative. It was a strategy session that felt more like a heist planning than a family discussion. We debated the variables. We could try to get Dad to intervene, but we both agreed he was too compromised, too beaten down by years of emotional erosion to be useful until the very end. We could call the police to the lodge, but Loretta was a master manipulator. She would play the hysterical victim, claim I assaulted her, and turn it into a he said, she said domestic dispute that would stall the protective order. No, we needed this to play out in the open. We needed it on the record. "We do not run," I said, making the final decision. "We go on the offense. We lure her into the open." I pulled out my phone and texted Riley. It was 2 a.m, but I knew she would be up prepping the emergency petition. "Change of plans. We need a hearing in the city tomorrow afternoon. We are going to trick her into coming to you." I explained Walter's idea about the ticket. Riley's response came 3 minutes later. "That is brilliant. And risky. But I love it. Here is the pitch. Tell her the local notary canceled due to the storm aftermath. Tell her the only way to get the bridge loan approved within 24 hours is to sign the documents in person at the bank's regional headquarters in the city. Tell her the bank requires a wet signature in front of a corporate officer because of the loan size. Greed will make her move." I read the text to Grandpa. He smiled. A slow, dangerous expression. "She will believe that," he said. "She thinks banks exist to serve her. She will be annoyed, but she will be desperate. If she thinks the loan falls through without that trip, she will crawl over broken glass to get there." "And the ticket?" I asked. "We tell her it is faster," Walter said. "The roads are icy. It is a 4-hour drive to the city, but a 40-minute flight from the regional strip. We tell her I am too frail for the long car ride. We tell her I am willing to sign, but only if we fly so I can see my doctor immediately after. She will see the ticket as a convenience I paid for, not a trap." It was perfect. It used her own narrative against her, my frailty and her urgency. "One more thing," Walter said as I stood up to leave. "Tomorrow morning, you have to sell it. Sabine, you cannot just be passive. You have to be broken. You have to make her believe you have switched sides. Can you do that?" I touched the bruise on my cheek. It was tender, a constant. throbbing reminder of why we were doing this. I can do it, I said. I will be the best defeated stepdaughter she has ever seen. I slept for 3 hours, a dreamless, black sleep, and woke up before the alarm. I spent 20 minutes in front of the bathroom mirror, not trying to hide the bruise, but studying it. I let my hair hang limp. I washed the defiance out of my eyes and replaced it with exhaustion. When I walked into the kitchen, Loretta was already there, aggressively packing the remaining food into cooler bags. She looked up, ready for a fight, her shoulders squared. I didn't give her one. I slumped onto a stool, keeping my head down. "Loretta," I said, my voice thick with fatigue. "I am sorry about last night, really." She paused, a carton of eggs in her hand. "Are you?" "I was up all night thinking," I lied. "You are right. About the money. I looked at the numbers again. Dad is drowning, isn't he?" Loretta's posture softened, her ego inflating like a balloon. "He is, Sabine. That is what I have been trying to tell you. I am not the villain here. I am the lifeboat." "I know," I said. I was scared for Grandpa. But if this loan saves the house, and saves Dad, then we should do it." I looked up at her, letting my eyes fill with fake, pleading tears. "I just want us to be okay. I'm tired of fighting you. Loretta, you win. You handle it. You are the only one who knows how." Loretta set the eggs down. A smile spread across her face, beatific and terrifying. It was the smile of a conqueror accepting the surrender of the last enemy stronghold. "Oh, honey," she cooed, walking over and wrapping me in a stiff, performative hug. "I knew you were smart. I knew you would understand eventually. Thank you. That means the world to me." She pulled back, her hands gripping my shoulders. "We are going to fix everything. Today." "About that," I said, seizing the opening. "I checked the weather and the road reports. The pass is a mess. And I saw an email on Dad's phone. The local notary is closed. Power outage from the storm." "What?" Loretta snapped, her face hardening instantly. "We have an appointment." "I know," I said quickly, "but I have a solution. I called the bank, the one on the loan application. They said if we get to the main branch in the city by 3, they can do the signing and the funding same day, but we have to be there in person." "The city?" Loretta groaned. "That is a 4-hour drive in this slush. Walter will never make it. He will complain the whole way." "That is why I booked us a flight," I said, dropping the lie effortlessly. "From the regional airstrip. It leaves at 2:30. It gets us there in 40 minutes. Grandpa said he would handle the cost. He just wants to get it over with and see his doctor." Loretta stared at me. I held my breath. This was the pivot point. If she checked the flight details, if she questioned why I was suddenly so helpful, it would all fall apart. But greed is a powerful blinder. She didn't see a trap. She saw a private plane ride, or close enough to it, and a fast track to her $300,000. She saw a stepdaughter who had finally fallen in line and was using her logistics skills to serve the queen. "Fine," she said, smoothing her sweater. "That is actually very proactive of you. Sabine, good thinking. We will fly. It is more dignified anyway." She turned and shouted up the stairs. "Charles! Walter! Hurry up! We are flying to the city. Plans have changed." I turned away to hide the cold smile that touched my lips. She had taken the bait. The next hour was a blur of frantic packing. I helped carry boxes to the SUV for the short drive to the airstrip. I watched Dad move like a sleepwalker, carrying Grandpa's suitcase. I stood by the back of the car, watching the lodge. The sun was high and bright, and the icicles hanging from the eaves were dripping, a steady rhythm of melting water. The snow that had trapped us was turning to slush, gray and heavy. The lodge looked different now. 2 days ago, it had looked like a prison. Now, it looked like a stage set being struck after the final performance. I touched my cheek. The bruise was still there, tender and purple, but I knew it would fade. In a week, it would be yellow. In 2 weeks, it would be gone. But the mark we were about to put on Loretta's life? The legal record of fraud, the restraining order, The public humiliation of being served papers in an airport terminal? That wouldn't fade. That was going to last forever. "Sabine," Loretta called from the passenger seat, rolling down the window. "Stop daydreaming. We have a flight to catch. Do not make us late for my closing." "Coming, Loretta?" I called back. I climbed into the back seat next to Grandpa Walter. He was staring straight ahead, his hands folded over the handle of his cane. As I buckled my seatbelt, he shifted slightly, just enough so his elbow brushed mine. It was a silent confirm, game on. I pulled out my phone and sent one last text to Riley. "Target acquired. We are en route to the airstrip. ETA to the city. 3:15 p.m. Have the process server ready." Riley sent back a single emoji. I looked at the back of Loretta's head. She was checking her makeup in the visor mirror, reapplying her lipstick, getting ready for her close-up. "You know," she said to the car at large, "I really think this is going to be the best year yet for the Mercers. I can feel it." "I think you are right, Loretta," I said softly. "I think you are absolutely right." The engine roared to life, and we began the descent down the mountain, leaving the snow behind and heading toward the justice that was waiting on the tarmac. We arrived back in the small town of Redwood Summit, just as the town clock was striking 9. The streets were a slushy mess of gray snow and exhaust fumes, a stark contrast to the pristine silence of the mountain lodge we had left behind. Loretta was in a frenzy. She was tapping furiously on her phone, rescheduling the imaginary notary appointment she still believed was happening, checking the weather, and barking orders at my father to drive faster. "We need to eat fast," she announced as Dad pulled the SUV into the parking lot of a diner near the regional airstrip. 20 minutes tops. I want to be in the air by 10 so we can land, get the rental, and make it to the bank by 1. I am not losing this rate lock because you people chew slowly." We sat in a vinyl booth that smelled of stale coffee and bleach. I waited until the waitress had poured the coffee before I dropped the hammer. "We are not going to the bank first, Loretta," I said. I kept my voice flat, the voice of someone reading a train schedule. She stopped stirring her coffee. The spoon clinked against the ceramic. "Excuse me?" "I called Dr. Evans," I lied, referencing Grandpa's old cardiologist in the city. "He had a cancellation at 1 o'clock. Grandpa needs clearance before he can travel to Arizona. If we do not take this slot, we cannot book him into the facility next week." "We do not have time for a doctor," Loretta hissed, leaning over the table. "The money comes first. We sign the papers. We get the funds. Then we worry about his heart." "No," my father said. The word was soft, but it landed in the middle of the table like a brick. Loretta turned her head slowly to look at him. "What did you say?" "I said no," Dad repeated. He didn't look at her. He was staring at his hands, which were clenched around his mug, but his jaw was set. "If Sabine says he needs a checkup, he gets a checkup. The loan can wait an hour. My father's health is the priority." It was the first time in 15 years I had seen him choose his father over her. Loretta looked like she had been slapped. She opened her mouth to scream, to berate him, to pull the leash tight again. But she stopped. She saw the stubborn set of his shoulders. She calculated the risk. If she pushed too hard right now, Dad might balk at the signing entirely. "Fine," she spat, retreating into a sulk. "Fine, go to the doctor, but I'm going straight to the bank to prep the officers. I will meet you there. Do not be late." It was exactly what we wanted. Separation. "Here," I said, sliding a printed boarding pass across the table toward her. "I checked you in. Grandpa and I will take the car to the doctor since it is on the way. You fly. It is faster. You can get the paperwork started." Loretta snatched the paper. She didn't look at the flight number. She didn't look at the arrival gate. She just saw a ticket that put her in charge and got her away from us. "At least someone is thinking efficiently," she muttered. 40 minutes later, I watched from the terminal window as Loretta marched through security, her heels clicking on the linoleum, her black leather bag clutched tight to her chest. She looked like a woman going to war. She had no idea she was walking directly into a cage. Grandpa Walter and I didn't take the car to the doctor. We walked 3 gates down to the same flight. We boarded last, sitting in the very back row while Loretta sat in Economy Plus, too busy putting on her noise-canceling headphones to notice the 2 people slipping onto the plane behind her. When we landed in the city, the sky was the color of a bruise. We waited until Loretta had stormed off the jet bridge, phone to her ear, already shouting at some poor rental car agent. Then we exited. Waiting for us at the bottom of the escalator, looking like a Valkyrie in a navy blue power suit, was Riley Torres. She didn't smile. She didn't wave. She just nodded, her eyes locking onto the bruise on my face. "Hey," she said, her voice tight. "Hey," I said. "Is this him?" she asked, looking at Walter. "This is the client," I confirmed. Riley extended a hand. "Mr. Mercer, it is an honor. I have heard you are a man who appreciates a good strategy." "I appreciate justice," Walter said, shaking her hand firmly. "And I appreciate anyone who can help me get a tick off my back." Riley handed me a thick manila envelope. "This is it. The petition for emergency guardianship, the motion for temporary restraining order, the affidavit of financial exploitation, and the big one, the ex parte motion to freeze assets." She tapped the folder. "I filed it all electronically 2 hours ago. The judge signed the emergency order based on the photos of your face and the transcript of the dinner conversation. The accounts are already frozen. The sheriff is serving the bank right now." "And Loretta?" I asked. "The clerk is calling her." Riley checked her watch. "Right about now." Across town, in the lobby of the First National Bank Tower, Loretta Mercer was screaming at a receptionist. "What do you mean the officers are in a meeting?" she demanded, slamming her hand on the marble desk. "I have an appointment. I am bringing you a $300,000 loan package." "Ma'am, please lower your voice," the receptionist said, looking terrified. Loretta's phone rang. She snatched it out of her bag, seeing a local number. "Finally," she muttered. "This better be the loan officer." "Hello?" she barked into the phone. "Is this Loretta Mercer?" a voice on the other end asked. It wasn't a banker. It was dry, bureaucratic, and bored. "Yes, this is she. Who is this?" "This is the clerk of the district court, probate division. I am calling to inform you that an emergency petition has been filed against you regarding the estate and person of Walter Mercer. Judge Holloway has scheduled an immediate hearing for 4 o'clock today to address allegations of elder abuse and financial fraud." Loretta froze. The noises of the bank lobby faded into a dull roar. "What?" she whispered. "That is ridiculous. Who filed it?" "The petitioner is Sabine Mercer, acting on behalf of Walter Mercer. You are required to appear. If you fail to appear, a default judgment will be entered against you, and a bench warrant may be issued for your arrest depending on the outcome of the protective order hearing." "Sabine," Loretta hissed the name like a curse. 4 o'clock, Mrs. Mercer, courtroom 3B. Do not be late." The line went dead. Loretta stared at the phone. Her hands were shaking. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through her rage. She looked around the bank lobby. She realized suddenly why the loan officers weren't coming out. They knew. The accounts were probably already flagged. She looked at the time. It was 3:15. The courthouse was 20 minutes away in traffic. She didn't think about running. Narcissists do not run. They fight. She thought about the papers in her bag. She thought about her performance skills. She convinced herself in that split second that this was just a misunderstanding, a tantrum thrown by a jealous stepdaughter. She could fix this. She just had to get in front of the judge and cry a little. She had to explain that she was the victim here. She turned and ran for the revolving doors, her heels skidding on the polished floor. She flagged down a taxi, throwing herself into the back seat. "Courthouse!" she screamed at the driver. "Drive fast!" At the courthouse, the air was stale and smelled of floor wax and anxiety. We sat on a wooden bench outside courtroom 3B. Grandpa Walter sat in the middle, looking calm and composed, his hands resting on the head of his cane. I sat on his right, Riley on his left. We were a phalanx. "She is going to try to charm him," Riley warned us. organizing her files on her lap. Judge Holloway is tough, but he is fair. He lets people talk. She is going to use that. She is going to paint you as unstable, Sabine, and she is going to paint Walter as incompetent. Let her talk, Walter said. The more she talks, the more rope she unspools. I checked my phone. 3:55. She is cutting it close, I said. She will be here, Riley said confidently. She cannot resist the spotlight. Just then, the elevator doors at the end of the hall dinged open. Loretta burst out. She looked disheveled. Her hair was windblown, her silk scarf askew. She was clutching her black bag like a shield. She scanned the hallway, her eyes wild, until they landed on us. She stopped. She saw me. She saw the bruise on my cheek, which I had stopped trying to hide with hair. She saw Riley, looking cool and predatory in her suit, and she saw Walter, staring at her with a look of utter disappointment. She didn't scream. She didn't attack. She straightened her spine, smoothed her jacket, and put the mask back on. She walked toward us, her chin high. You have made a terrible mistake, Sabine, she said as she passed us. Her voice was low, trembling with suppressed fury. You have humiliated this family for the last time. Save it for the judge, Loretta, Riley said without looking up from her file. The bailiff opened the heavy oak doors. All rise. We filed in. The courtroom was empty except for the clerk and the judge. Judge Holloway was a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a face that suggested he had heard every lie ever invented. We took our places at the plaintiff's table. Loretta stood alone at the defendant's table, clutching her purse. Matter of Mercer, Judge Holloway said, looking over his glasses. We are here on an emergency petition. Counsel? Riley stood up. Riley Torres for the petitioner. Your Honor, we are asking for an immediate freeze of all assets held jointly or severally by Loretta Mercer and Charles Mercer, pending an audit. We are also asking for a permanent restraining order preventing Mrs. Mercer from contacting Walter Mercer or entering his property. On what grounds? The judge asked. Systematic financial exploitation, fraud, and physical abuse, Riley said clearly. Objection! Loretta shouted. She wasn't waiting for a turn. She stepped out from behind the table. This is a lie. This is a family dispute. That woman, she pointed a shaking finger at me, is a jealous, vindictive girl who is manipulating a senile old man. Mrs. Mercer, sit down, the judge said sharply. You will have your turn. Loretta sat, fuming. Riley walked to the bench. Your Honor, I have submitted an affidavit detailing the timeline. For 5 years, Mrs. Mercer has systematically drained Walter Mercer's pension and savings. But 3 days ago, the escalation turned violent. Riley held up a large, glossy print of the photo I took in the bathroom. The bruise was purple and ugly. This injury was inflicted by Mrs. Mercer when Sabine Mercer confronted her about stolen funds. She fell, Loretta blurted out. She is clumsy. She slipped on the ice. We also have audio recordings, Riley continued, ignoring the outburst. Recorded legally under Colorado statute. In these recordings, Mrs. Mercer admits to planning to use Walter Mercer's home equity to pay off her own debts. She admits to misleading him about the nature of the documents she asked him to sign. Riley placed a flash drive on the judge's bench. And finally, Riley said, turning to look at Loretta, we have this. She pulled out the copy of the trust document from 6 years ago. Mrs. Mercer claims she is the rightful steward of Walter's estate. However, Mr. Mercer established a revocable trust 6 years ago, specifically excluding her and his son from control. Citing fears of exactly this kind of exploitation, he has been competent and aware the entire time. Loretta went pale. She stared at the document in Riley's hand. That is a fake. He is confused. He does not know what he signed. Mr. Mercer is present, the judge said. Mr. Mercer, can you stand? Grandpa Walter stood up. He didn't need his cane. He stood straight, his shoulders back. I am here, Your Honor, he said. His voice was strong, resonant, filling the room. Did you sign this trust? The judge asked. I did, Walter said. I signed it because I knew this day would come. I knew she would try to take everything. I played the fool, Your Honor, because it was the only way to keep myself safe until my granddaughter could help me. He turned to Loretta. I am not confused. Loretta, I never was. I heard every word you said about me. I heard you call me a burden. I heard you call my house a dead asset. And I saw you hit Sabine. Loretta looked like she was shrinking. The air was leaking out of her balloon. She looked at the judge, then at the door, realizing there was no exit. I took care of you, she stammered, tears finally coming, real tears of terror this time. I cooked for you. I gave you a home. You gave me a prison, Walter said, and you charged me for the privilege. Riley stepped forward for the kill. Your Honor, we also have evidence that Mrs. Mercer attempted to coerce Mr. Mercer into signing a hard money loan application disguised as medical forms just last night. We ask that the temporary order be made permanent and that Mrs. Mercer be removed from the home immediately to allow Mr. Mercer to return to his property in peace. The judge looked at the photos. He looked at the trust. He looked at Loretta, who was now sobbing into her hands, a mess of ruined mascara and shattered entitlement. The court finds the evidence compelling, Judge Holloway said, his gavel hovering. The temporary restraining order is granted. All joint accounts are frozen effective immediately. Mrs. Mercer, you are to surrender all keys to the property at 42 Maple Drive to the sheriff's deputy on your way out. You are not to come within 500 feet of the plaintiff or Mr. Walter Mercer. But where will I go? Loretta wailed, looking up, her face streaked with black tracks. I cannot go home. My things are there. You will be allowed a police escort to retrieve personal items only, the judge said coldly. I suggest you find a hotel, or perhaps you can use that one-way ticket I see listed in the evidence file. The gavel banged down, a sharp, final sound that echoed like a gunshot. I looked at Grandpa. He wasn't smiling. He looked tired, but he looked light, as if a 100-pound weight had been lifted off his back. I looked at Loretta. She was standing alone in the middle of the room, the papers of her defense scattered on the floor around her. She looked at me, her eyes filled with hate, but for the first time, I didn't feel the chill. I touched my cheek. The bruise still hurt, but the pain was different now. It wasn't the pain of a victim. It was the pain of a soldier who had taken a hit to win the war. Let's go, Grandpa, I said, taking his arm. I think we are done here. We turned our backs on her and walked toward the heavy oak doors, leaving Loretta Mercer alone in the silence of her own making. The courtroom air was so still that the hum of the ventilation system sounded like a roar. Riley Torres stood at the plaintiff's table, her posture rigid, holding a document that looked far older than the crisp, fraudulent papers Loretta had tried to push across the dinner table just 24 hours ago. Your Honor, Riley began, her voice cutting through the silence. The defense has spent the last 20 minutes characterizing my client, Mr. Walter Mercer, as a confused, incompetent elderly man who needs the benevolent guidance of his daughter-in-law. They claim that Mrs. Loretta Mercer was merely trying to organize his affairs because he had no plan. Riley walked to the bench and placed the yellowed document on the judge's desk. This is the Walter Mercer Revocable Trust, Riley announced, turning to look directly at Loretta. It was executed 6 years ago. It was notarized, filed, and funded long before Mrs. Mercer decided that her father-in-law's house was her personal piggy bank. And the most critical detail, Your Honor, is Article 4. Judge Holloway adjusted his glasses, flipping to the page. In Article 4, Riley continued, Mr. Mercer explicitly designates his granddaughter, Sabine Mercer, as the sole trustee and beneficiary of his real estate and liquid assets. Furthermore, there is a specific disinheritance clause regarding Charles and Loretta Mercer, citing, and I quote, concerns regarding financial irresponsibility and undue influence. A gasp went through the small gallery. I looked at Loretta. The color had drained from her face so completely that her makeup looked like a mask painted on a corpse. She hadn't known, all those years of scheming, all those care packages, all those forced family dinners. She had been chasing a prize that had been locked away from her 6 years ago. She did not know this existed, Riley said, gesturing to Loretta. That is why she was so desperate to get him to sign the new power of attorney and the quitclaim deed last night. She was not trying to update his medical records. She was trying to supersede a legal will she feared existed but could not find. This was not care. Your Honor, this was a hostile takeover attempted in the middle of a blizzard. Judge Holloway looked up from the document, his eyes hard. He turned his gaze to the witness stand where Grandpa Walter was seated. Mr. Mercer, the judge said, I need to ask you a direct question. Did you feel forced to sign the papers presented to you by your daughter-in-law? Grandpa Walter straightened his jacket. He looked tired, but his voice was steady, stripping away the confused old man act he had worn for survival. I felt hunted, Your Honor, Walter said. For 5 years, I have felt like a prey animal in my own kitchen. If I was tired, she would shove a paper in front of me. If I was sick, she would say she could not get my medicine unless I signed a check. She called me a burden. She told me I was taking up space that belonged to the living. And last night she told me that if I did not sign my house over to her, my son would be on the street. He paused, his hand gripping the handle of his cane. But the worst part wasn't the threats to me, Walter added softly. It was watching her strike my granddaughter. I saw her slap Sabine across the face because Sabine dared to ask where the money was going. That was when I knew I could not play dumb anymore. Thank you. Mr. Mercer, the judge said. Ms. Sabine Mercer, please take the stand. I walked to the stand. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was clear. I swore the oath and sat down. Facing the room, I saw Dad sitting in the back row, his head in his hands. I saw Loretta glaring at me with the desperation of a trapped rat. Ms. Mercer, Riley asked, can you tell the court what happened on the night of December 20th? We were trapped in the lodge by the snow, I stated, my voice echoing slightly in the room. Loretta initiated a conversation about gratitude that turned into an interrogation about my finances. When I confronted her about the thousands of dollars I had transferred to their joint account for Grandpa's care, she became enraged. She admitted the money was gone. When I tried to leave the room, she blocked my path and struck me on the left cheek. Your Honor, Riley said, permission to display evidence. The large screen on the side wall flickered to life. The photo I had taken in the bathroom appeared. It was massive, undeniable. The bruise was a dark, angry purple, the imprint of a hand clearly visible against my pale skin. And regarding the funds, Riley said, Ms. Mercer, you are a data analyst, correct? I am, I said. Did you perform an analysis of the transfers sent to the Mercer joint account versus the expenses claimed by the defendant? I did, I said. I cross-referenced the dates I sent money for specific medical emergencies with Loretta Mercer's public social media posts. The screen changed. On the left was a bank transfer receipt dated October 14th for $1,200, labeled Grandpa Water Heater Repair. On the right was an Instagram post from Loretta dated October 16th. It showed a new designer handbag with the caption, Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. Self-care. The screen changed again. Transfer. Heart medication. $400. Instagram post. Spa day with the girls. Champagne flows. It went on for 5 slides. 5 years of theft documented in timestamps and hashtags. The courtroom was silent. The evidence was not just legal. It was visceral. It showed a woman bleeding a pensioner dry to fund a lifestyle she could not afford. Loretta's lawyer stood up, looking flustered. Objection! This is circumstantial. And, Your Honor, we must address the conduct of the plaintiff. This entire hearing is an ambush. Ms. Sabine Mercer and her grandfather booked a one-way ticket for my client and tricked her into coming to this city. They prepared these documents in advance. This proves malice. This is a revenge plot disguised as a legal petition. Riley did not even flinch. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, counsel calls it a revenge plot. We call it an extraction plan, when a victim is being held hostage, financially and emotionally, by an abuser who controls their home, their food, and their access to the outside world. You do not ask the abuser for permission to leave. You build an exit strategy. Riley pointed to the stack of evidence. We prepared these documents because we knew that the moment Loretta Mercer realized she could not bully Walter into signing over his home, she would escalate. And she did. She struck Sabine. She tried to force a signature on a predatory loan. That one-way ticket was not malice. It was the only way to get a vulnerable senior citizen safely into a courtroom without his abuser physically stopping him. Judge Holloway looked at Loretta's lawyer. Counsel, are you suggesting that the plaintiff should have informed the person robbing him that he intended to call the police? The lawyer opened his mouth, then closed it. He sat down. Judge Holloway stacked his papers. He looked at Loretta, who was now trembling. Her arrogance dissolved into sheer terror. The court has heard enough, the judge said. The evidence of financial exploitation is overwhelming. The evidence of physical assault is corroborated by photography and testimony. The intent to defraud Mr. Butcher Mercer of his real property is clear from the documents presented. He banged the gavel once. The court orders the following. First, a permanent freezing of all accounts held by Loretta Mercer, solely or jointly. A forensic accountant will be appointed by this court to audit the last 5 years of financial activity. Every penny that was misappropriated from Walter Mercer will be identified and repaid, even if it requires the liquidation of the defendant's personal assets. Loretta let out a sob, a sharp, wounded sound. Second, the judge continued, Ms. Sabine Mercer is appointed temporary guardian of Walter Mercer's estate and person. Effective immediately, she has full authority to secure his property and medical care. Third, a permanent restraining order is issued against Loretta Mercer. You are to have no contact with Walter Mercer or Sabine Mercer. You are not to come within 500 feet of their persons, the property at 42 Maple Drive, or Mr. Mercer's medical providers. This includes electronic communication. Then, the judge turned his eyes to the back of the room. Mr. Charles Mercer, stand up. My father stood up slowly. He looked like a man made of ash. I did not see you named in the specific allegations today, Judge Holloway said, his voice dropping to a register that shook the floorboards. But I saw the evidence. You lived in that house. You ate the food bought with stolen money. You watched your wife berate your father and strike your daughter. I just wanted peace, Dad whispered. You did not want peace, the judge corrected him. You wanted convenience. There is a distinct difference. Standing by and watching a vulnerable person be abused because you are too cowardly to intervene is not neutrality, Mr. Mercer. It is complicity. You should consider yourself lucky that your father's trust only disinherits you, rather than indicting you. Sit down. Dad collapsed back onto the bench, burying his face in his hands. Court is adjourned, the judge said. Bailiff, please escort the defendant to the clerk's office to surrender her keys. The gavel struck for the final time. We walked out into the hallway. The fluorescent light seemed brighter, sharper. Loretta was waiting near the elevators with her lawyer, arguing loudly. When she saw us, she broke away and lunged forward, though she stopped short when the bailiff stepped in her path. What am I supposed to do? She screamed, her voice echoing off the marble walls. She waved the printed boarding pass in her hand, the one-way ticket to the city. You locked my accounts. You took my house keys. I have nowhere to go. I am stuck in this city with nothing but this stupid ticket. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. You planned this. You brought me here just to leave me here. What is this ticket for? Sabine? Is this your idea of a joke? Sending me on a trip to nowhere? I stopped. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the fear. Yes, but I also saw the narcissism that still refused to accept responsibility. She still thought this was something that had been done to her, not something she had brought upon herself. It is not a joke. Loretta, I said. My voice was calm. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. And that ticket wasn't to give you a new life. It was just the transportation method to bring you to the place where your old life ended. My life isn't over, she shrieked. I will fight this. You can fight, I said. But you will be fighting with a frozen bank account and a public record of elder abuse. That ticket was one way for a reason. You do not get to go back to the way things were. You do not get to go back to that house. You do not get to go back to controlling us. I pointed to the exit sign. That is your destination. Loretta, out. Loretta stared at me, her mouth working, but no sound coming out. She looked at the ticket in her hand, crumpling it into a ball. Grandpa Walter stepped forward. He leaned heavily on his cane, but his eyes were dry and clear. He looked at the woman who had tormented him for half a decade. You asked why we booked the trip, Walter said softly. I booked that seat the day you decided to hurt my granddaughter instead of telling the truth. You chose violence, Loretta. I just chose the travel arrangements. He turned to me. Come on, Sabine, let's go home, my real home. We turned our backs on her. We walked down the long, polished hallway toward the exit doors, where the winter sun was streaming in. I clutched the heavy file folder to my chest. It contained the trust, the court order, and the future. Behind us, I heard Loretta start to scream again, a high, thin sound of impotent rage. But we didn't stop. We didn't look back. There was no need for a final confrontation or a dramatic goodbye. The silence of the judge's gavel had said everything that needed to be said. As we pushed through the heavy glass doors and stepped out into the cold, clean air of the city, I felt the weight of the last 15 years lift off my shoulders. The bruise on my cheek throbbed in the cold wind, but it felt like a badge of honor now. We had walked into the fire, and we had walked out the other side, leaving the arsonist burning in the ashes of her own design. The one-way ticket had finally been used, and for the first time in a long time, I knew exactly where I was going. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please comment down below where you are tuning in from. I would love to hear your thoughts and connect with you all. Don't forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like the video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.